Hey children, welcome back to another great day of Bible study, and we're going to look at the relationship between King Saul and David. And how did they get along? You see, before the whole Goliath thing, Saul was a great warrior, and he was in a campaign, and he was supposed to wait for Samuel for some sacrifices, and he didn't do that. And so he did his sacrifices, and God was upset because he didn't obey God. And so what happened was God allowed an evil spirit to come into King Saul. And King Saul would get so angry inside of the courts that he would need musicians to play for him to soothe his spirit. And guess which musician was chosen? King David. And so King David would, he's Shepherd Boy David. He's not king yet, but Shepherd Boy David would be playing his harp. Now, after David killed Goliath, the ladies in the streets would be singing, Saul has killed his thousands, but David has killed his 10,000s. Saul's not a fan of this. He gets very resentful, and he's scared that people are liking David more than him. And so David will be playing his harp, and Saul would just get all fired up and hate David and take his spear and throw it right at David and trying to kill him. And he didn't do this one time, he did it twice. Well, he still doesn't like David too much. So he has a plan, and he offers his daughter in marriage. And knowing David's heart and integrity, he says, I'm not rich enough for your daughter, King Saul. I can't do that. And so Saul says, you can bring me 100 Philistines. And so what that means is you can kill 100 Philistines, and that will be the bride price. That will be enough for me to say, you're worthy of my daughter. And so what does David do? He goes out and he does this. You see, this is a trap set by Saul, because it says, Saul says he wants him dead because who can kill 100 people by himself? And especially in the amount of time that he was given. And so Saul is really trying to capture David and get David killed. But David doesn't bring back 100 Philistines. He kills 200. This is what he does. 200 instead of one. So regretfully, resentfully, Saul gives his daughter in marriage and keeps his word. So Saul ends up sending assassins to David's house to kill him. Well, his daughter, Saul's daughter, figures this out and gets David to escape. And David escapes out the window and runs away. So this isn't once, this isn't twice, this isn't 3 times, this is 4 times that Saul has tried to kill David, and we're not done yet. You see, Saul gets angry at David again and chases him out into the wilderness. And he wants to kill David. And David hides in a cave. And Saul ends up staying the night in the same cave. And so you know what David does? He cuts off a corner of Saul's robe. And when Saul leaves the cave the next day, David goes out and says, hey, look at this, King Saul. I took your robe. I could have killed you last night. But David repents. He says, I should not have laid a finger on God's anointed. David feels bad about his action, even though this is the 5th time Saul has tried to kill him that we know of. And they reconcile, and Saul and David promise not to hurt each other again. But that evil spirit gets into Saul and chases David again. Again, King Saul chases David. And now David finds where he is at night again. David finds where King Saul is. And you know what he does? He takes King Saul's spear and water jug and leaves his own right there, so King Saul knows God is with David. And it probably scares King Saul again. See, David is a man that is full of, remember that Ruth word we had? Hesed? David's full of hesed. He's full of grace. He's full of mercy. He's full of loving kindness. He's full of love. He's full of patience. And he will keep his covenant to not hurt the Lord's anointed. It's hard to forgive people sometimes, but isn't that what David does? David lives in grace and mercy, and when he can do the exact same thing Saul was trying to do to him, David shows mercy and love and grace. And that's the way you and I should be. I mean, Saul tried to kill David 6 times. If someone tried to kill you 6 times, could you act the way David does? I don't know. But maybe in story time we'll explore one of these beautiful words just a little bit more coming up and figure out maybe just a little bit more. How did David show so much hesed to King Saul? Hello children, welcome to this edition of Story Time. David was really good at forgiving Saul and was really good at showing kindness and love and loving kindness and being able to keep his covenant through all these things. So we're going to read all about how Tiger forgives. Tiger, Tiger, share today what the Bible has to say. To forgive means move on or move on past. Don't let angry feelings last. If a friend steps on my toe, I will pardon her, you know. When someone won't share a toy, I forgive that girl or boy. Sharing can be very hard sometimes. Then we have a brand new start. I feel kindness in my heart. I forgive are words I say almost every single day. If a friend does not play fair, I forgive to show I care. Like Miss Hillary, did you know she cheated at Bible Land when she was a little one? Amazing! But her cousin forgave her anyway. Bible Land was an old board game. I think it was carved out of stone. God forgives, so I can too. That is what I try to do. I forgive, God says to you, are those words that you say too. Forgive others, and God will forgive you. Luke 6:37. God forgave David. David forgave Saul. Sometimes it's really hard to forgive other people. I get it. It's just hard. You don't want to do it. But we have to remember God loves us. And God forgives us. And so maybe it's easier to forgive other people when we remember that God forgave me for all the crazy, terrible things that I've done. And so I should be able to forgive others for the not so bad things. Look, God loves you. God loves you dearly, and He doesn't want you to hold that bitterness in your heart. Saul never forgave David for being popular. And it made him crazy, and it made him angry, and he wanted to kill one of his most loyal subjects. And yet David forgave Saul at least 6 times for trying to kill him. And we remember David as the one after God's own heart, one of the most righteous kings over all of Israel. And he's mentioned time and time and time again as the great-grandfather of King Jesus. And that is amazing. And he was able to do that because he forgave and he forgave and he forgave all throughout his reign. You guys are amazing. Remember, be kind, be patient, and be loving to those that might not be that way with you. Be a David, not a Saul. Live in hesed, not in anger. You guys are great. Obey your parents. Remember, we have Bible class at 7 o'clock at the Eastwood Church of Christ on Wednesday. Hey, if you like this, like it. If you want to share it, share it. Tell me what you learned in the comments and tell me who you're going to share it with. We'll see you next time, guys. Bye-bye.